They said that some sins were too dark to be revealed, but in Virginia in 1842, a woman's love would destroy an empire built on blood, and the man who was hired as a breeding slave would become the father of her child. This is the truth they tried to bury. Hello, my friends. This is Malik Jefferson, narrator of Slave's Revenge, and today you will hear a story that will touch every part of your heart. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It's always exciting to know how far our stories reach. Get ready, because the excitement begins now. The Whitmore plantation stretched across 400 acres of Virginia soil like a scar that refused to heal. Tobacco fields rolled toward the horizon in perfect rows, their leaves heavy with the sweat of people who would never taste freedom. The main house stood at the center of it all, white columns gleaming under the summer sun, windows tall and proud, gardens manicured to perfection. It was beautiful in the way a polished gravestone is beautiful, cold, immaculate, and built on death. Senator Elijah Whitmore owned it all: the land, the crops, the bodies that worked them. He was a man of considerable influence in Richmond, respected in the halls of power, feared by those who understood what his wealth truly meant. His voice carried weight in debates about states' rights and economic prosperity. He spoke eloquently about tradition, about heritage, about the natural order of things, but he never spoke about how that order was maintained. When the transatlantic slave trade was outlawed in 1808, men like Whitmore faced a problem. Their empire needed bodies, constant, renewable, expendable. So they found a solution, one that lived in the shadows of legality and morality. They called them breeders. Samuel was 28 years old when Whitmore purchased him from a trader in Charleston. He was not bought for his skill with tobacco or his ability to mend fences. He was bought for his body: 6 feet of muscle and bone, healthy teeth, strong back, clear eyes. The bill of sale listed him under a different category than the field workers. The price was higher. The purpose was explicit. He was brought to Whitmore Plantation on a Tuesday morning in March. The other enslaved people watched as he was led past the quarters toward a separate cabin near the stables. They knew what it meant. They had seen others like him before. Men who were ordered into cabins with women they did not know. Men who fathered children they would never be allowed to raise. Men whose humanity was reduced to a single biological function. Samuel walked with his head up. It was the first thing people noticed about him, not defiance exactly. That would have gotten him killed, but something deeper, a refusal to disappear inside his own skin. He moved like a man who remembered what it felt like to make his own choices, even though those days were long behind him. The overseer, a thick-necked man named Garrett, gave him the rules on the first day. You do what you're told. You go where you're sent. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't look at the main house. You don't look at Miss Catherine. You understand? Samuel nodded. Say it. I understand. Garrett spat into the dirt. Good. Senator paid good money for you. Don't make him regret it. The cabin they gave him was larger than most, a concession to his value, not his comfort. It had a cot, a lantern, a basin for washing. Through the window, he could see the main house in the distance. At night, he could see candlelight flickering behind the curtains. He wondered what kind of woman lived in a house like that. What kind of woman could sleep knowing her wealth was built on suffering? He would find out soon enough. Catherine Whitmore was 26 years old and had been married to the senator for 8 years. She was beautiful in the way that wealth allows, well-fed, well-dressed, well-protected from the world's harsher truths. Her skin was pale from spending days indoors. Her hands were soft, her voice was cultured and careful. She had been raised to be the perfect political wife, gracious at dinner parties, silent during disagreements, decorative but not distracting. But beneath the silk and the smiles, something else lived, a restlessness she could not name, a sense that the life she was living belonged to someone else. She had been told in no uncertain terms to stay away from the breeding cabins. "It's not something a lady concerns herself with," Elijah had said one evening over supper, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. "That part of the operation is handled by Garrett. You needn't think about it." But she did think about it. Late at night, lying beside her husband's sleeping form, she thought about the women who were taken to those cabins. She thought about the children born there, sold away before they could walk. She thought about the arithmetic of it all. How many bodies equaled how much profit? How many lives could be measured in pounds of tobacco? She hated herself for not doing more than thinking. It was late May when she first saw Samuel. She had ridden out to the stables to check on her mare, who had been limping the day before. The afternoon was thick with heat, the kind that made breathing feel like work. Most of the field hands were far out in the tobacco rows. The stable was quiet except for the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. And then she saw him. He was standing near the back of the stable, repairing a broken harness. His shirt was off, folded on a bale of hay beside him. Sweat gleamed on his shoulders. He worked with a focus that seemed almost meditative, his hands steady and sure. The lantern hanging from a nail above him cast shadows across his face. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, eyes that looked like they were staring at something far beyond the stable walls. Catherine froze. She had seen enslaved men before. Of course she had. They were everywhere on the plantation, in the fields, in the kitchens, tending the gardens, but she had never really looked at them. Not like this, not as people. But Samuel was impossible not to see. He glanced up and noticed her standing in the doorway. For a moment, their eyes met. She felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. The recognition of another human being, trapped just as surely as she was, in a life neither of them had chosen. He lowered his gaze immediately, dropped his shoulders, made himself smaller. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Didn't hear you come in." She should have left. She should have turned around and walked back to the house and never thought about him again. That was what a proper lady would have done. Instead, she stepped inside. "I came to check on my horse," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The chestnut mare, is she all right?" "Yes, ma'am. Garrett had me wrap her leg. Should be fine in a few days." "You know horses?" He hesitated. "My father was a blacksmith. Before..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Catherine nodded slowly. "Thank you for taking care of her." "Just doing what I'm told, ma'am." There was no bitterness in his voice, no anger, just a quiet acceptance that made her feel suddenly, violently ashamed. She left without another word, but that night, lying in bed beside Elijah, she could not stop thinking about the man in the stable, about the way he had looked at her, not with lust or resentment, but with something closer to sorrow, as if he understood exactly what she was and pitied her for it. The next day, she found an excuse to return to the stables, and the day after that. Each time she told herself it meant nothing. She was simply checking on her horse, simply ensuring the work was being done properly, simply passing time in the unbearable heat of a Virginia summer. But the truth was harder to swallow. The truth was that Samuel made her feel seen in a way her husband never had. When they spoke, brief exchanges, nothing improper, he listened to her words as if they mattered. He did not dismiss her thoughts or redirect the conversation back to himself. He did not treat her like a beautiful object to be displayed and protected. He treated her like a person. It was dangerous. She knew that. She knew what happened to enslaved men who were even accused of looking at white women the wrong way. She knew what happened to white women who violated the unspoken rules of their society, but knowing did not stop her from returning. Knowing did not quiet the strange, insistent pull she felt toward him. By the end of June, their conversations had grown longer. She would bring him water under the pretense of being kind. He would thank her with careful politeness. And slowly, Carefully, they began to talk about things that had nothing to do with horses or work. He told her about his childhood before he was sold, about his mother, who sang in a voice that could make grown men weep, about his father, who had taught him to work metal until it bent to his will, about the small moments of joy that had existed even in bondage. She told him about her life too, about the suffocating expectations, the loneliness of being married to a man who saw her as an extension of his ambition, the guilt that gnawed at her every time she sat down to a meal she had not earned. "I don't know how to live with it," she admitted one evening, her voice barely above a whisper, "knowing what this place is built on." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. "Then don't," he said simply. "It's not that easy." "No," he agreed, "but it's that simple." The summer deepened. The tobacco grew tall, and in the quiet spaces between duty and decorum, something impossible began to take root. Neither of them spoke its name, but they both felt it growing. August arrived like a fever. The air hung thick and wet over the plantation, turning every breath into an effort. The tobacco leaves drooped under their own weight, and the enslaved workers moved through the fields like ghosts, their bodies bending under the sun's relentless hammer. Inside the main house, Catherine sat by the window, watching the heat shimmer above the fields, and felt the walls closing in. Elijah had been in Richmond for 3 weeks. The legislative session had stretched longer than expected, and he had sent word that he would not return until September. Catherine should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something closer to permission. She went to the stables every evening now. It had become a ritual, this dangerous thing they were doing. Not quite friendship, not quite anything else. They talked while he worked, mending leather, checking hooves, organizing tack. She sat on a bale of hay and watched his hands move with practiced precision. Sometimes they spoke about small things. Other times they sat in silence, and that felt like a conversation too. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked one night. Samuel paused, his hands stilling on the bridle he was repairing. "Every day." "Then why don't you?" He gave her a look that was almost gentle. "Where would I go, Miss Catherine? They'd hunt me down before I made it 10 miles. And when they brought me back..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to.
Did you know? The origins of modern American policing trace directly back to slave patrols established in the early 1700s. South Carolina created the first formal slave patrol in 1704, giving armed white men legal authority to stop, question, search, and brutally punish any black person found without proper documentation from their owner. These patrols operated as organized terror squads, riding at night to prevent gatherings, suppress potential uprisings, and capture runaways. Patrollers could enter any slave quarters without warning, inflict punishments including whipping and mutilation, and faced no legal consequences for violence against enslaved people. After the Civil War, many former slave patrollers became the foundation of Southern police departments, bringing their methods and racial attitudes into the new law enforcement system. The parallels between slave patrol tactics, stopping black people without cause, demanding papers, using excessive force, and modern policing issues remain disturbingly evident. Some historians argue that understanding this origin is essential to comprehending why police-community relations in black neighborhoods remain fraught with tension centuries later. The badge and uniform changed, but the underlying mission of controlling black bodies through state-sanctioned violence persisted long after slavery's legal end.
"I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what? For all of it. For being part of this." Samuel set down the bridle and turned to face her fully. "You didn't choose to be born into this world any more than I chose to be born into mine. But we're here now, both of us. Question is, what we do with it. What can we do? I don't know yet." His eyes held hers, "But I think we're trying to figure it out." That was the moment everything changed. Not with a touch or a kiss, but with the acknowledgement that they were trying to figure something out together. that despite every law and custom and danger, they were becoming something more than mistress and slave. They were becoming real to each other. The first time he touched her, it was to catch her hand as she stumbled on the uneven stable floor. His fingers were rough from work, warm and solid. She looked down at their hands, his dark skin against her pale, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, pulling away. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't apologize." He searched her face, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The decades of survival instinct telling him to step back, to lower his gaze, to make himself invisible. And something else, something newer and more dangerous. "This can't happen," he said, but he didn't move away. "I know. They'll kill me if they find out. I know." "And you?" He shook his head. "They'll destroy you too. I know," she said again. Then, softer, "But I'm already dying, Samuel. I've been dying since the day I married him. At least this would be living." The kiss, when it came, tasted like salt and summer and everything forbidden. It was brief, almost chaste, but it remade the world. When they pulled apart, both of them were shaking. "We can't," Samuel said, but his voice had no conviction. "We can't," Catherine agreed. But the next night, she came back, and the night after that. And slowly, carefully, in the spaces where no one was watching, they built something that should not have been possible. A connection, a tenderness, a love that existed in defiance of everything their world stood for. They were careful. They had to be. Catherine came to the stables only when darkness had fallen, and the other enslaved people were locked in their quarters. Samuel made sure to maintain his distance during the day, his eyes sliding past her as if she were invisible. They spoke in whispers. They moved like conspirators, but inside those stolen hours, they were just two people trying to hold on to something beautiful in a world designed to destroy beauty. Samuel told her things he had never told anyone. About the auction block where he had been sold at 16. About the woman he had loved on a previous plantation, who had been sold away before he could say goodbye. About the children he had been forced to father, none of whom he would ever know. "Do you hate me?" Catherine asked one night, "for what my people have done to yours?" He considered the question carefully. "I hate what you represent, the system that made you, but you." He shook his head. "No. I think you're trying to be better than what you were born into. That's more than most people can say. It's not enough. Maybe not. But it's something." Catherine told him about her own cage, the one made of silk and expectations, how she had been taught from childhood that her value lay in her ability to ornament a man's life. How Elijah had courted her, not because he loved her, but because her father's shipping business would be useful to his political career. How she had spent 8 years being the perfect wife and had disappeared a little more every day. "Do you love him?" Samuel asked. "No, I don't think I ever did. Do you love me?" The question hung in the air between them. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. "Yes," she said finally. "God help me, yes." Samuel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "This is going to end badly. You know that." "I know. We should stop, right now, before it goes any further." "We should," she agreed, but neither of them moved. The night they first made love, the air was thick with an approaching storm. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and thunder rumbled like a warning. Catherine had told the house staff she was retiring early with a headache. She slipped out through the kitchen door and ran across the dark yard to the stables, her heart hammering against her ribs. Samuel was waiting. They didn't speak. Words felt inadequate for what was happening between them. He touched her face like she was something precious. She pulled him close, like she was drowning, and he was air. When they came together, it was with a desperation born of knowing this was temporary, stolen, doomed, but it was also tender, gentle, real. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the hay, listening to the storm break over the plantation. Rain hammered the roof, wind shook the walls, and inside that small shelter they pretended the world outside didn't exist. If things were different, Catherine whispered against his chest, what would we be? Free, Samuel said simply. Where would we go? North. Canada, maybe. Somewhere they couldn't touch us. Could we be happy there? He kissed the top of her head. We could try. But morning always came, and with it, reality. Catherine would slip back to the main house before dawn, her body aching with pleasure and guilt in equal measure. Samuel would return to his work, his face carefully blank, his movements careful and controlled. And everyone on the plantation would go about their business, never knowing that in the darkness, two people were rewriting the rules. By September, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She knew immediately the morning sickness, the tender breasts, the bone-deep exhaustion. She had been married for 8 years without conceiving, and Elijah had long ago stopped trying. This child could only belong to one man. Terror came first, cold and absolute. If Elijah found out, Samuel would die, not quickly, not mercifully. They would make an example of him. And Catherine herself would be ruined, divorced, disowned, destroyed. But beneath the terror, something else stirred, something she had thought was dead. Hope. She told Samuel on a moonless night in late September. He went very still, his hands frozen on the bridle he had been mending. You're sure? Yes. How long? 2 months. Maybe 3. He set down the bridle carefully as if it might shatter. Then he stood and walked to the stable door, staring out at the dark fields. Catherine watched his shoulders rise and fall with each breath. She waited. Finally, he turned back to her. What do you want to do? I don't know. I came here to tell you first, before I... She couldn't finish the sentence. Samuel crossed the stable in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She felt his heart racing against her cheek. It's mine, he said, wonder and horror mixing in his voice. A child of mine that's actually mine. Yes. They'll know. When it's born, they'll know. I know. He pulled back to look at her face. We have to run. Both of us. Before Elijah comes back from Richmond, before you start showing, we have to leave now. Where would we go? North. Philadelphia, maybe. There are people there who help runaways, free black communities. We could disappear. They'll hunt us. I know. They'll never stop looking. I know. His hands cupped her face. But at least we'd be together. At least our child would be born free. Catherine felt something break open inside her chest. All her life, she had been taught to be careful, to follow rules, to accept her place in the order of things. But standing there in Samuel's arms, feeling the flutter of new life inside her, she realized she was done accepting. When? She asked. Soon. I need to make arrangements, get supplies, find someone who can help us cross into Pennsylvania. How long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Catherine nodded, her heart racing. Elijah comes back in 2 weeks. Then we go before he does. She kissed him then, hard and desperate. I love you, she said against his mouth. I love you, and I'm terrified. I love you too, and we're going to survive this, all 3 of us. But even as he said it, Samuel felt the weight of history pressing down on them. He had seen what happened to enslaved people who ran. He had seen what happened to white women who broke the ultimate taboo. The odds were not in their favor, but the alternative was unthinkable. So they began to plan their escape. 2 people the world said could never love each other, preparing to burn their lives down for a chance at something better. Outside, autumn began to creep across Virginia. The tobacco was harvested, the days grew shorter, and in the Whitmore plantation's main house, Catherine Whitmore began gathering everything she could not bear to leave behind. She was going to need a new name soon, a new life, a new story to tell about who she was and where she came from. But for now, she was still the senator's wife, still playing her part, still counting down the days until she could finally be free. The third week of September brought an unexpected letter. Catherine was sitting in the morning room pretending to read, when Mary, the house girl who brought the post, knocked softly and entered with a silver tray. "Mail from Richmond, ma'am." Catherine's stomach clenched. She recognized Elijah's handwriting immediately, precise, controlled, each letter formed with mechanical perfection. She waited until Mary left before opening the envelope. The message was brief. "Returning October 2nd, Governor's dinner on the 5th. Ensure your green silk is pressed. E.W., October 2nd. That gave them exactly 9 days. Catherine felt the room tilt slightly. 9 days to gather supplies, arrange passage, and vanish into the night with an enslaved man. 9 days before her husband returned, and their window closed forever. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her pocket, then walked calmly upstairs to her bedroom. Once inside, she locked the door and let herself shake. She couldn't go to the stables until nightfall. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. She took lunch in her room, claiming another headache. She paced the floor. She watched the sun drag itself across the sky like it was stuck in honey. When darkness finally came, she slipped out through the kitchen garden and ran. Samuel was waiting in the usual spot, the back corner stall where the shadows were deepest. He saw her face and immediately pulled her close. "What happened?" "Letter from Elijah. He's coming back on October 2nd. Samuel went rigid. "That's 9 days. We have 9 days. He pulled back to look at her, his hands on her shoulders. "Then we leave on October 1st, the night before he arrives. But you said you needed 2 weeks to arrange everything. We don't have 2 weeks. We have 9 days. His voice was steady, but she could feel the tension vibrating through him. "I've been talking to Josiah." "Who's Josiah?" "Works in the tobacco barn. He has a brother in Philadelphia who got out 5 years ago. The brother sends letters through the blacksmith in town, coded messages about where to go, who to trust. Josiah's been planning his own run for years. Will he help us?" "He already agreed. Says there's a Quaker family about 40 miles north near Fredericksburg. They hide runaways in a false cellar. From there, we can follow the North Star toward Pennsylvania." Catherine tried to absorb this. The magnitude of what they were planning felt suddenly, terrifyingly real. "What do we need?" "Money. As much as you can get without raising suspicion. Dark clothes for both of us. Food that won't spoil. Dried meat, hard bread, apples, matches. A good knife. And horses. 2 of them. I can get the money. Elijah keeps cash in his study for household expenses, and there's jewelry I can take. The horses are trickier. If we take them, they'll know we're running. They'll come after us faster. What if we walk? 40 miles through Virginia backcountry with you pregnant. We'd never make it." Samuel paced the stable, thinking. "We take the horses. But we don't take yours, too recognizable. There are 2 bay geldings in the north field that work the plows. Not pretty, but strong. We take those." Catherine nodded, trying to memorize everything. "What else?" "We go at midnight on October 1st. I'll have the horses ready at the creek crossing, 1/2 mile south of the main house. Can you get there without being seen?" "Yes. The house staff goes to bed by 10. I'll wait until everyone's asleep. Bring only what you can carry in a saddlebag. Nothing else. No trunk, no extra dresses, nothing that would slow us down." "Samuel," she touched his face, "this is real. We're really doing this. We're really doing this." He kissed her forehead. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Good. Fear will keep us sharp." He held her gaze. "But Catherine, I need you to understand something. Once we leave, there's no going back. Not ever. Your whole life, everything you've known, it ends that night. You'll be a fugitive, a traitor to your class. They'll hunt you just as hard as they'll hunt me." "I know." "Do you? Because it's one thing to talk about leaving, and another thing to actually—" "I know," she interrupted firmly. "I know what I'm giving up, and I know what I'm choosing. This child, you, a chance at a life that's actually mine. I know, Samuel, and I'm certain. He searched her eyes, and whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. All right, then we do this together. They spent the next hour going over details, timing, routes, contingency plans if things went wrong. Samuel had clearly been thinking about this for a long time. He knew which roads to avoid, which towns had sympathetic communities, which rivers could be crossed safely. He had the kind of detailed knowledge that only came from years of quiet observation and desperate hope. "How long have you been planning to run?" Catherine asked. "Since the day I arrived here, but I was waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances." He smiled faintly. Didn't expect those circumstances to include the senator's wife and an unborn child. Regrets? Not one. The next 9 days were the longest of Catherine's life. She moved through each day like an actress playing a role, performing the routines of plantation life while her mind raced with preparations. She took small amounts of cash from Elijah's study, never enough to be noticed at once, but steadily accumulating a significant sum. She packed a saddlebag and hid it under her bed, filling it with practical clothing, sturdy boots, dried food wrapped in cloth. She wrote a letter to her sister in Charleston, carefully worded so it could be read as a normal correspondence, but contained a goodbye. She wrote another letter to her father, thanking him for the life he had given her and apologizing for the scandal she was about to create. She sealed both letters and tucked them into the desk in Elijah's study, where they would be found after she was gone. During the day, she watched Samuel from a distance as he worked. He was careful to maintain his usual patterns, mucking stalls, repairing equipment, disappearing into the breeding cabin when ordered. No one suspected anything. Why would they? An enslaved man and the senator's wife? It was unthinkable. That was what would save them, the sheer impossibility of it. But Catherine also saw the toll the waiting took on Samuel, the careful control he had to maintain, the way he flinched when Garrett barked orders, the nights when she came to the stables and found him sitting in the dark, his head in his hands, shoulders tight with tension. "Tell me about Philadelphia," she said one night, trying to distract him. "What will it be like?" Samuel looked up, and slowly his expression softened. "Free. That's what it'll be like. Free. But what will we do? How will we live? I can work. Blacksmithing, carpentry, stable work. I'm good with my hands. And you?" He smiled slightly. "You can do anything you want. That's what freedom means. I've never done anything I wanted in my life." "Then it's time to start." On September 30th, the day before they were to leave, Catherine woke with a sense of finality. This was the last morning she would wake up as Catherine Whitmore. The last time she would sleep in this bed, eat at this table, look out these windows. By tomorrow, she would be someone else entirely. She dressed carefully in her simplest day dress. She walked through the house one last time, touching the furniture, the walls, the door frames, not with nostalgia. She felt no love for this place, but with a need to mark the ending, to acknowledge what was being left behind. In the afternoon, she went to the garden and picked flowers, not for any particular reason, just because she could, because it was September and the roses were still blooming, and tomorrow she would be running for her life through the Virginia wilderness. That night, she took her last bath as a married woman. She washed her hair with lavender soap. She put on her plain traveling dress and sturdy boots. She packed the last few items into her saddlebag. The money, a miniature portrait of her mother, a small knife she had taken from the kitchen. Then she sat by the window and watched the sun set over the tobacco fields. Samuel would be preparing too, gathering supplies, bridling the horses, making sure everything was ready for their midnight departure. In just a few hours, they would meet at the creek crossing, and then they would ride into the unknown together. Catherine pressed her hand to her stomach, where their child was growing, a child who would be born free. Who would never know the weight of chains or the sting of a master's whip? That alone made everything worth it. At 11 o'clock, she heard the house settle into silence. The servants had retired to their quarters. The fires had been banked. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then quieted. Catherine stood, picked up her saddlebag, and walked to the door. This was it. The moment of no return. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards creaked softly under her feet as she made her way toward the stairs. Every sound seemed amplified, her breathing, her heartbeat, the rustle of her skirts. She moved as quietly as she could, staying in the shadows. She made it down the stairs without incident, through the dining room, past the parlor, into the kitchen. The back door was locked. She had oiled the hinges that morning, so it opened soundlessly. She slipped outside into the cool night air and closed the door behind her. The moon was a thin crescent, providing just enough light to see by. Catherine crossed the kitchen garden, then the side yard, moving quickly but not running. Running would draw attention if anyone happened to be awake. The tobacco fields stretched out before her, silver-black in the moonlight. She could see the dark line of trees that marked the creek about half a mile away. That was where Samuel would be waiting. She was halfway across the field when she heard it. A voice calling from the house. Miss Catherine, are you out here?" Mary, the housegirl, must have woken and noticed her absence. Catherine's heart seized. She dropped into a crouch between the tobacco rows, her breath coming fast and shallow. She waited, listening. "Miss Catherine?" Mary's voice was closer now. She must have come outside. Catherine pressed herself flat against the earth, the tobacco leaves brushing her face. She could hear Mary walking around the yard, calling her name. If she was discovered now, everything was over. Samuel would be whipped, sold, or worse. Their child would be born into slavery. All of it would end before it began. She stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, she heard Mary's footsteps retreat back toward the house. The door closed. Silence returned. Catherine waited another 5 minutes to be sure, then stood and kept moving, faster now. The creek was close, and there in the shadows beneath the trees she saw him. Samuel, standing beside 2 dark horses, waiting for her. She ran the last 100 yards and fell into his arms. "You came," he whispered against her hair. "Of course I came." He pulled back to look at her face. "Ready?" "Ready." He helped her mount one of the horses, then swung onto the other. They walked the horses quietly through the creek, the water splashing softly around the animals' legs. On the far bank, Samuel turned to look back at the plantation one last time. Catherine followed his gaze. The main house sat white and still in the distance, a monument to everything they were leaving behind. "Goodbye," she whispered. Then Samuel urged his horse forward, and they rode north into the darkness, 2 fugitives chasing freedom under a sliver of moon. Behind them, the Whitmore plantation slept on, unaware that its mistress had vanished into the night. They rode hard for the first 3 hours, pushing the horses as fast as they dared in the darkness. Samuel navigated by the North Star, keeping them on a steady northward trajectory through fields and forest, avoiding roads where they might be spotted. The night air was cool against Catherine's face, and she focused on the rhythm of the horse's movement, the creak of leather, the sound of Samuel's horse moving just ahead of hers. They didn't speak. Speech felt dangerous, like it might break the spell that was carrying them forward. By 3 in the morning, Samuel slowed his horse to a walk. They were deep in forest now, following what looked like an old hunting trail. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out even the thin moonlight. "We need to rest the horses," Samuel said quietly, "and ourselves. We'll stop here until first light." They dismounted in a small clearing. Samuel tethered the horses where they could reach grass and water from a small stream.
Did you know? While most Americans know about ships crossing the Atlantic, Few know about the massive domestic slave trade that moved hundreds of thousands of enslaved people by sea along the American coastline throughout the 1800s. After Congress banned the international slave trade in 1808, an internal maritime network transported enslaved people from the Upper South to the Deep South via ships sailing from ports like Alexandria, Virginia, and Baltimore to New Orleans, Mobile, and Savannah. These coastwise voyages were often more brutal than the Middle Passage itself. Ships were smaller, more crowded, and captains faced no international scrutiny. Enslaved people were chained below deck in conditions as horrific as transatlantic vessels, but with one crucial difference. These were American ships flying the American flag, carrying American citizens to be sold in American ports. The journey from Chesapeake Bay to New Orleans took 2 to 3 weeks in conditions so deplorable that mortality rates reached 15%. One vessel, the Creole, became famous in 1841 when 19 enslaved people mutinied, killed the crew, and successfully sailed to the Bahamas, where British authorities freed them, one of the most successful slave revolts in American history. Between 1820 and 1860, approximately 1 million enslaved people were forcibly relocated from the Upper South to the Lower South, with at least 200,000 traveling by these coastal ships. Insurance companies created special policies for slave cargo, calculating acceptable loss rates. Ship manifests listed enslaved people alongside barrels of flour and bales of cotton, all merchandise. The coastwise trade revealed that slavery wasn't a regional southern issue, but a national economic system, with northern shipbuilders constructing the vessels, northern insurance companies underwriting the cargo, and northern ports facilitating the transport. Slavery was an American institution, not merely a southern one.
Catherine leaned against a tree trunk, her legs trembling from hours in the saddle. She wasn't used to riding this long. Her thighs ached, and her back felt like it had been twisted into knots. Samuel noticed her discomfort. "Sit down before you fall down." She sank to the ground gratefully. Samuel sat beside her and handed her a piece of dried meat from his pack. She chewed mechanically, not tasting it, her mind still racing with what they had done. "How far have we come?" she asked. "Maybe 10 miles. Not far enough." "When will they realize we're gone? Garrett does morning roll call at dawn, so..." He looked up at the sky. 3 hours, maybe 4 if we're lucky. And then they come after us. Garrett, probably a few other men, maybe dogs. He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather. Catherine felt ice settle in her stomach. Dogs? Don't think about it now. We have a head start. That's what matters. He touched her hand. "How are you feeling? The baby?" "Fine. Tired, but fine. You should sleep. I'll keep watch." "I can't sleep. I'm too... Try anyway. We have a long day ahead of us tomorrow." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. The night sounds of the forest surrounded them. Crickets, an owl hooting in the distance, the soft rustle of leaves. It should have been peaceful. Instead, every sound felt like a threat, but she must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Samuel was gently shaking her shoulder. Grey light was seeping through the trees. Time to move. They rode all day, stopping only to rest the horses and drink from streams. Samuel kept them off the main roads, threading through forests and fields, sometimes backtracking to throw off anyone who might be following their trail. He moved with the confidence of someone who had been planning this for years, which Catherine supposed he had. By late afternoon, her body was screaming. Every muscle hurt. Her hands were raw from gripping the reins, but she didn't complain. Samuel was in just as much pain, and he never mentioned it. He just kept moving forward, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape. "How much further to the Quaker family?" Catherine asked during one of their brief rests. "Another 20 miles. If we push through the night, we could be there by dawn." "Can the horses make it?" "They'll have to." As the sun set, they ate another sparse meal of dried meat and hard bread. Samuel refilled their waterskins from a creek. Then they mounted again and rode into the gathering darkness. This was when the fear really started to take hold. In daylight, Catherine could see where they were going, could track their progress. But in the darkness, every shadow became a potential threat. Every sound could be horses approaching. Every snap of a twig could be men with guns and dogs. Samuel seemed to sense her growing panic. He slowed his horse until they were riding side by side. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "Tell me something, anything." "Like what?" "I don't know. Tell me about when you were a child. Before all this, what were you like?" Catherine tried to think back through the layers of fear and exhaustion. "I was different then. Brave, I think. Or at least less afraid. I used to climb trees in our orchard and read books my father said were inappropriate for girls. I wanted to be a ship captain. A ship captain. My father owned 3 merchant ships. I used to go down to the docks and watch them being loaded. The captains seemed so free, like they could go anywhere, do anything. I wanted that. What happened? I grew up, started wearing dresses instead of climbing clothes, started attending tea parties instead of sneaking down to the docks, started becoming what I was supposed to be instead of what I was." She paused. "And then I married Elijah, and that was that. The rest of me just disappeared. Maybe it didn't disappear. Maybe it was just waiting." She looked at him. In the darkness, she could barely see his face, but she could hear the certainty in his voice. Waiting for what? For this. For a reason to come back. They rode in silence for a while. Then Catherine said, "What about you? What were you like before?" Samuel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I was happy. That's what I remember most. Being happy. My mother sang, my father taught me his trade. We had a community. It wasn't freedom, exactly. We were still enslaved, but we had each other. And then my mother died, and my father was sold, and I was sold. And I learned that happiness wasn't something people like me got to keep. Do you think we'll get it back? Happiness. I think we'll get a chance at it. That's more than most people in our position ever get." Around midnight, Samuel suddenly raised his hand in a signal to stop. Catherine pulled her horse to a halt, her heart jumping into her throat. "What?" "Shh!" He was listening intently, his head cocked to one side. Catherine strained to hear what he was hearing. At first, there was nothing but the normal forest sounds. Then she caught it, distant barking. Dogs. Samuel's face went hard. "They're closer than I thought. We need to move faster." "I thought we were ahead of them." "We were. They must have picked up our trail at the creek crossing and followed it through the day." He kicked his horse into a faster trot. "Come on." "The Quaker farm can't be more than 5 miles from here." They rode hard, branches whipping at their faces, the horses breathing heavily. Behind them, the barking grew louder. Catherine's hands shook on the reins. This was what Samuel had warned her about. This was what happened to runaways. "Samuel, don't look back, just ride." The forest began to thin. They burst out into open farmland, fields of harvested corn stubble stretching away on either side. In the distance, Catherine could see the dark shape of a farmhouse and barn. "There," Samuel pointed. "That's got to be it." They galloped across the fields, the horses foaming with sweat. The barking was very close now. Catherine risked a glance back and saw torchlight flickering at the edge of the forest, maybe half a mile behind them. They reached the farmhouse and practically fell off their horses. Samuel pounded on the door, glancing back at the approaching lights. "Please," he shouted, "please, we need help. They're coming." The door opened. A tall man in plain Quaker dress stood there holding a lamp. He took one look at them, Samuel black and desperate, and Catherine white and disheveled, and immediately understood. "Inside. Quickly." They stumbled into the house. The Quaker man, his name was Thomas, called to his wife. "Hannah, we have friends. Prepare the cellar." Hannah appeared, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She didn't ask questions, just led them through the kitchen to a pantry. She moved aside a shelf, revealing a hidden door. "Down," she said. "There's water and blankets. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." Samuel and Catherine descended a ladder into a small underground room, barely 6 feet square. Hannah closed the door above them, and they heard the shelf being moved back into place. They were in complete darkness. Catherine groped for Samuel's hand and held on tight. Above them, they could hear footsteps, voices, the sound of dogs barking frantically outside. Someone pounded on the farmhouse door. "Open up! We're looking for runaways!" Thomas's calm voice. "What sort of runaways?" "A slave and a white woman. They stole horses from the Whitmore plantation. Seen 'em?" "I have not. My wife and I retired early this evening. We've seen no one." "Mind if we look around?" "I do mind, actually. This is private property, and you have no warrant." "Unless you're accusing me of harboring fugitives?" A pause. Then the dogs picked up a scent heading this way. "Dogs can be fooled. Try the Miller farm 2 miles north. They have more visitors than we do." Another pause. Catherine held her breath. Finally, "All right, but if we find out you're lying, Quaker, there'll be consequences. I'm aware of what consequences await those who tell falsehoods. Good night, gentlemen." The door closed. Footsteps retreated. But the dogs kept barking for another 10 minutes, circling the house. Catherine buried her face against Samuel's chest and tried not to scream. Finally, mercifully, the sounds faded. The dogs and men moved off toward the north. They waited in the darkness for what felt like hours. Finally, the shelf moved above them, and Thomas's face appeared in the opening. "They're gone. You can come up." They climbed out of the cellar, legs shaking. Hannah had tea and bread waiting on the kitchen table. Catherine wanted to sob with relief. "Thank you," Samuel said, his voice rough. "Thank you for saving our lives." Thomas inclined his head. "We do what conscience demands. Though I must tell thee, friend, thy situation is grave. The men who came here tonight, they were from the Whitmore plantation?" "Yes." "Then they'll be back. They won't give up easily. The senator has influence throughout Virginia." He looked at Catherine. "And thee, if I may ask, is thee truly willing to give up everything for this man?" "I already have," Catherine said simply. Hannah smiled. "Then we'll help thee on thy way. But thee must leave tonight, another hour at most. We'll provide fresh horses and supplies. There's a safe house in Harper's Ferry, then another in Pennsylvania. From there, thee can reach Philadelphia." "How far is Philadelphia?" Catherine asked. 2 weeks of hard travel, maybe less if thee is lucky. Maybe more if thee is not. 2 weeks. Catherine tried to imagine 2 more weeks of this, hiding, running, always looking over her shoulder. But then she felt Samuel's hand take hers, and she remembered why they were doing this. "We can make it," she said. Thomas studied them both. "I believe thee can. I've seen many runaways pass through here. Most are broken by fear, but thee—" He shook his head. "Thee have something worth running for. That makes all the difference." An hour later, they were on fresh horses with full saddlebags, riding north again under a sky full of stars. The Quaker farm fell behind them, and with it, the closest they had come to capture. But they weren't safe yet, not even close. The chase had only just begun. They reached Harper's Ferry 6 days later, exhausted and filthy, but alive. The journey had been brutal, sleeping in barns and caves, eating whatever they could find, pushing through rain and mud. Catherine had lost weight, her face gaunt and pale. Samuel's hands were torn from helping their horses navigate rocky terrain. But they were still together, still moving north, still free. The safe house in Harper's Ferry belonged to a free black family named the Joneses. Marcus Jones was a blacksmith who had bought his own freedom 20 years earlier. His wife, Ruth, ran a seamstress shop. They had helped dozens of runaways over the years, hiding them in a false wall behind their fireplace. Ruth took one look at Catherine and immediately drew her a bath. "You're with child," she said. It wasn't a question. Catherine nodded. "How far along?" 3 months, maybe 4. Ruth's expression softened. "That changes things. You need rest, proper food. You can't keep running like this." We don't have a choice. There's always a choice, child. And right now, your choice is to take care of that baby or lose it before it ever has a chance to be born. She handed Catherine a towel. You'll stay here for 3 days. Rest, eat, regain your strength. Then we'll talk about the next leg of the journey. Samuel was in the blacksmith shop with Marcus, helping with repairs in exchange for their hospitality. Catherine could see them through the window. Samuel's shoulders bent over the forge, Marcus showing him something about the metalwork. For a moment watching him, she could almost imagine a different life, a normal life, Samuel working as a blacksmith, her taking care of their child, a small house somewhere, peace. But that life was still weeks away, maybe months, maybe never if they were caught. Ruth brought her hot soup and bread. "You love him," she said, sitting down across from Catherine. "Really love him, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Then you've got what you need. Love like that. It'll carry you through almost anything." Ruth paused. "But I need to be honest with you. The road north gets harder from here. You're wanted now. Both of you. Every sheriff between here and Pennsylvania will be looking for a black man and a white woman traveling together. That's not something you can hide. What do we do?" "You split up." Catherine's heart dropped. "What?" "Just temporarily. Just through the dangerous sections. Samuel travels with Marcus. They can pass as a blacksmith and his apprentice heading to a job. You travel with me. I have family in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. We can say you're my cousin from Richmond coming to visit." "Absolutely not, Catherine. No, we stay together. That's non-negotiable." Ruth sighed. "I understand. I do. But think about the baby. Think about what happens if you're caught together. The senator will show no mercy, not to Samuel and not to you. At least if you're separate, one of you might escape, or both of us might be caught. No, we've come this far together. We finish it together." Ruth looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Then we do this the hard way. Marcus knows a route through the mountains, less traveled, harder to patrol. It'll take longer, but it's safer. You'll need to be strong, though. The terrain is rough." "I can do it." "Can you?" Ruth's gaze was sharp but kind. "I'm not questioning your courage. I'm questioning your body's ability to handle what's coming. You're pregnant, exhausted, and running from men who want to kill you. That's not a criticism. That's just the truth." Catherine met her eyes. "Then the truth is that I don't have a choice. My child will be born free, or I'll die trying. There's no middle ground." Ruth smiled faintly. "You're stronger than you look." "I'm learning that." They stayed 3 days, as Ruth had insisted. Catherine slept in a real bed for the first time since leaving the plantation. She ate 3 meals a day. She washed her clothes and bathed and let her body recover from the constant terror and motion. Samuel did the same, working in the forge during the day but staying close to her at night, holding her while she slept. On the 3rd evening, Marcus spread a map on the kitchen table. "Here's the route. You'll follow the Potomac west, then cut north through the mountains here." He traced a path with his finger. "There are 3 safe houses along the way. I'll give you the names and locations. The last one is in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. From there, it's another week to Philadelphia." "How long total?" Samuel asked. "If weather holds and you don't run into trouble?" 10 days. But expect 12 or 14. The mountain passes are slow going." Catherine studied the map, trying to memorize the route. Pennsylvania seemed impossibly far away, a whole different world. "One more thing," Marcus said. "News travels fast. The senator has put out a reward for your capture. $500 for Samuel, $200 for Catherine." Catherine felt her stomach drop. "That much?" "That much? Which means you need to trust no one except the people I'm sending you to. Anyone else might turn you in for that kind of money. Stay off main roads, avoid towns, don't talk to strangers." Samuel nodded. "Understood." They left before dawn on the 4th day, supplied with food, new clothes, and Marcus's detailed instructions. Ruth hugged Catherine tightly before they left. "You're brave," she whispered, "braver than most. But bravery isn't always enough. Be smart too, be careful, and get that baby to freedom." "I will." The mountain route was everything Marcus had warned them about. Steep climbs, narrow paths, streams that had to be forded on horseback. The weather turned cold as they climbed higher, and Catherine was grateful for the wool coat Ruth had given her. Her body ached constantly, but she pushed through it. There was no alternative. They passed the first safe house without incident, a small farm owned by an elderly German couple who spoke broken English but whose eyes lit up when Samuel mentioned Marcus's name. They stayed one night, ate hot stew, and continued north. The second safe house was where things went wrong. They arrived in late afternoon, exhausted from a full day of riding. The house was supposed to belong to a Quaker family named the Ellises. But when they knocked on the door, a different man answered, younger, with calculating eyes that lingered too long on Catherine. "We're looking for the Ellis family," Samuel said carefully. "They moved. Last month. I bought the place from them." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But come in, come in. You look tired. Travelers, are you?" Every instinct Catherine had screamed danger. She caught Samuel's eye and saw the same wariness there. "Thank you, but we need to keep moving," Samuel said. "We're expected in the next town by nightfall." "Nonsense, it's getting dark. At least stay for supper. Really, we—" The man's hand moved to his belt, where Catherine now saw he had a pistol. "I insist." They had no choice. They followed him inside, where two other men were waiting. One of them, a sheriff's deputy based on his badge, looked at Catherine and Samuel with undisguised interest. "Well now," he said slowly, "what do we have here? A black man and a white woman traveling alone. That's unusual." "My brother and I are heading to Pennsylvania," Catherine said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Our father is ill." "Brother?" The deputy laughed. "Lady, I wasn't born yesterday. I've seen the wanted posters. Senator's wife and his breeding slave. $500 reward." He looked at the other men. "Looks like we just got rich, boys." Samuel's hand moved toward the knife at his belt, but the first man already had his pistol drawn. "Don't even think about it, boy. You make one move, and I'll shoot her first." They were trapped. Catherine's mind raced, looking for a way out, but there wasn't one. 3 armed men between them and the door, no weapons except Samuel's knife, no way to fight. "Tie them up," the deputy said. "We'll take them back in the morning, get the full reward." One of the men grabbed Samuel, forcing his hands behind his back. Samuel's eyes met Catherine's across the room, and she saw rage and helplessness warring there. If he fought, they would shoot him. If he didn't fight, they would turn them both over to the senator. Either way, they had lost. The rope was already going around Samuel's wrists when they heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching fast. The deputy went to the window. "Who the hell?" The door burst open. Marcus Jones stood there, a shotgun in his hands and fury on his face. Behind him were 3 other men, all armed. "Step away from them," Marcus said quietly. "Now." The deputy's hand moved toward his pistol. Marcus cocked the shotgun. The sound was deafening in the small room. "You really want to test me?" Marcus asked. "Because I've been fighting men like you my whole life, and I'm tired of talking." The deputy's hand stopped moving. "Good choice. Now drop your weapons, all of you." They complied, guns clattering to the floor. Marcus's companions quickly gathered them up while keeping their own weapons trained on the 3 men. "Untie him," Marcus ordered, nodding at Samuel. Catherine rushed forward and worked at the ropes binding Samuel's wrists. Her hands shook so badly she could barely manage the knots, but finally they came loose. Samuel pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "You 3 are going to forget you ever saw these people," Marcus said to the deputy and his friends. "You're going to forget this house exists. Because if word gets back to me that you're still looking for them, I'll make sure every free black community between here and Philadelphia knows your faces. You won't be safe anywhere, understand?" The deputy glared, but nodded. "Good, now get out." The 3 men fled into the gathering darkness. Marcus lowered the shotgun and turned to Catherine and Samuel. Ruth had a bad feeling about the Ellis house. Sent word ahead to some friends. Good thing we came when we did. Catherine was shaking too hard to speak. Samuel said, "Thank you. We owe you our lives. You don't owe me anything. Just get to Philadelphia. Live free. That's payment enough." He handed Samuel a piece of paper. "Here's a new route. Bypasses the Ellis place. Longer, but safer. Follow it exactly." They rode through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the men who had tried to capture them. Catherine's body screamed with exhaustion, but terror kept her upright in the saddle. They had come so close to losing everything, so close. Dawn found them high in the mountains, cold and exhausted, but still moving. Samuel pulled his horse to a stop at a ridge overlooking the valley below. In the distance, through the morning mist, they could see the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. "There," he said, pointing. "That's Pennsylvania. That's freedom." Catherine stared at the border, tears streaming down her face. They had made it. Not to Philadelphia yet, not to complete safety, but they had crossed into free territory. Their child would be born in Pennsylvania, born free. Samuel reached over and took her hand. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." "Not yet," she said, "but almost." They rode down from the mountains into Pennsylvania, two fugitives who had crossed an invisible line that changed everything. Behind them, Virginia receded into the distance. Ahead, Philadelphia waited, and for the first time since leaving the plantation, Catherine allowed herself to believe they might actually survive this. Philadelphia found them 2 weeks later, in early November, as the first snow of the season began to fall. They arrived after dark, dirty and half-starved, following Marcus's directions to a boarding house in the Northern Liberties neighborhood where free black families lived alongside working-class whites. The landlady, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, took one look at their faces and asked no questions. She simply showed them to a small room on the 3rd floor and told them rent was due at the end of the week. It wasn't much. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window overlooking a busy street. But it was theirs. No one could take it from them. That first night, Catherine stood at the window watching snow fall on Philadelphia and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming reality of it. They had made it. Against impossible odds, they had actually made it. Samuel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his hands resting gently on her stomach where their child was growing. 4 months now. She was starting to show, though her loose clothing mostly hid it. "What are you thinking?" he asked, "that I don't know how to do this? Be free. I've never been free in my life." "Neither have I. I guess we'll figure it out together." She turned in his arms to face him. "I'm scared." "Me too. What if they find us? What if the senator—" "Shh!" He kissed her forehead. "We're in Philadelphia now, Pennsylvania. We're legally free here. Even if the senator sends people looking, there are lawyers here who defend runaways, communities that protect them. We're not alone anymore. I want to believe that. Then believe it. We've come too far to give up now." The next morning, Samuel went looking for work. Philadelphia was a city of industry and opportunity. Shipyards, factories, workshops. His skills as a blacksmith were valuable here. By afternoon, he had found a position at a forge near the docks, working for a man named Henry Graves, who asked about his experience, but not his past. Catherine spent the day exploring their neighborhood. She had never been in a city this size. Richmond was large, but Philadelphia felt enormous. Buildings stacked close together, streets crowded with people of every description. She saw free black men and women walking openly, conducting business, living lives. It was stunning to witness. She also saw the poverty, the neighborhoods where the poorest lived, packed into tenements, struggling to survive, the children playing in filthy streets, the desperation in people's eyes. Freedom, she was learning, did not automatically mean prosperity. That evening, she and Samuel ate a simple meal in their room. Bread, cheese, apples bought from a street vendor. It felt like a feast. "I found a midwife today," Catherine said. "Mrs. Chen. She's Chinese, been delivering babies in this neighborhood for 20 years. She says the baby seems healthy." "Good. That's good." Samuel paused. "Did you tell her about us?" "I didn't have to. She saw my wedding ring and asked if my husband was black. When I said yes, she just nodded and told me I was brave. That's all. No judgment?" "None. I think people here are used to seeing mixed couples. Or maybe they just mind their own business better than people in Virginia." Samuel took her hand. "We need new names. Catherine and Samuel are too easy to trace back to the plantation. If word reaches Philadelphia that the senator's wife ran off with a slave, we need to be someone else by then." She hadn't thought about that, but he was right. They needed to disappear completely. "What names do you want?" she asked. He considered. "Something common, something that won't stand out. Thomas Freeman. That's a good free black name." "Thomas Freeman," Catherine repeated, testing it. "And me?" "Mary, Elizabeth?" "Sarah," Catherine said. "Sarah Freeman. We'll say we're married. That you're a blacksmith from Maryland who moved here for work. That we're just another working family trying to make our way." Sarah and Thomas Freeman. Samuel smiled faintly. "I like it." They practiced their new story that night, the lies that would become their truth. They were from Baltimore. They had married 2 years ago. They were expecting their first child. Thomas was a skilled blacksmith looking for steady work. Sarah had been a seamstress before the baby made it difficult. They were ordinary, unremarkable, invisible. It was perfect. The weeks passed. November turned to December. Samuel worked long hours at the forge, coming home exhausted but satisfied. He was good at his work, and Henry Graves was pleased with him. Catherine found work too, sewing for a dress shop owned by a Quaker woman who paid fair wages and asked no questions about Catherine's past or her marriage. Slowly, they built a life. They made friends with other families in the boarding house. They attended a small African Methodist Episcopal church where the congregation welcomed them without prying. They saved money, planning for the day when they could afford a real house, a real future. But the past had a way of reaching forward. It was mid-December when Catherine noticed the man watching their building. He was white, well-dressed, standing across the street for hours at a time. At first, she told herself she was being paranoid. Lots of people passed through the neighborhood. But after 3 days of seeing him in the same spot, her fear crystallized into certainty. Someone was looking for them. She told Samuel that evening. He went to the window and peered out carefully. "I see him," he said quietly. "He's there now." "What do we do?" "Nothing yet. He's watching, but he hasn't approached. Maybe he's not sure it's us. Maybe he's waiting for confirmation." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Or maybe he's waiting for backup." That night, they slept fully dressed, ready to run if necessary. But the knock on their door came not from bounty hunters, but from Mrs. Patterson. "There's a man downstairs asking questions," she said urgently. "Wants to know if anyone's seen a white woman and a black man traveling together. Says he's working for a family in Virginia, looking for stolen property." Catherine's blood went cold. Mrs. Patterson held up her hand. "I told him no such people live here. Told him to try the neighborhood south of Market Street, but he'll be back. Men like that always come back." "We need to leave," Samuel said. "Tonight." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Canada, maybe. Somewhere farther from Virginia." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "You run now, you'll be running forever. Every time someone looks at you sideways, you'll panic. Every stranger will be a threat. That's no way to live. That's no way to raise a child."
Did you know? Throughout the 19th century, American medical schools faced a critical shortage of cadavers for anatomical study and surgical training. Most states had laws restricting dissection to executed criminals, but this provided nowhere near enough bodies for the growing number of medical students. The solution was grave robbing. and the victims were overwhelmingly black. Professional resurrection men systematically robbed graves in black cemeteries, knowing that black families had no legal recourse and white authorities rarely investigated. Enslaved people who died were routinely sold to medical schools by their owners, who saw their bodies as one final source of profit. Free black people who died faced the same fate. Their graves were targeted because medical schools would pay $15, $25 per corpse, and black bodies could be stolen without consequence. Medical College of Georgia, University of Virginia, and countless other institutions built their reputations on knowledge gained from dissecting stolen black bodies. Some medical schools even had standing arrangements with local slaveholders to receive bodies of enslaved people who died. The trade became so extensive that by the 1850s, railroad companies offered special rates for shipping barrels marked turpentine that actually contained human remains. In 1882, a scandal erupted in Baltimore when authorities discovered that the Maryland College of Medicine had stolen and dissected over 400 bodies from black cemeteries over several years. Even more disturbing, some doctors conducted experimental surgeries on living enslaved people without anesthesia. Dr. J. Marion Sims, later celebrated as the father of modern gynecology, perfected his surgical techniques by operating repeatedly on enslaved women, believing the racist myth that black people felt less pain than whites. One woman, Anarcha, endured 30 experimental surgeries without anesthesia. The medical establishment's exploitation of black bodies didn't end with slavery. The practice continued into the 20th century with cases like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. The foundation of American medical education was built literally upon stolen black bodies, a fact rarely acknowledged in medical school histories.
And what do we do? Catherine asked desperately. You fight. Philadelphia has laws protecting freedom. You go to the Vigilance Committee. They help fugitives fight extradition. You get a lawyer. You make them prove you're who they say you are. And you trust that there are more people here willing to protect you than there are people willing to turn you in. It was a risk, a huge risk, but Mrs. Patterson was right. They couldn't run forever. The next morning, they went to the Vigilance Committee office on 6th Street. The director was a black man named William Still, who had helped hundreds of escaped slaves secure their freedom. He listened to their story without interruption, taking careful notes. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair. The senator is a powerful man. He has connections in Philadelphia. But you have something he doesn't. What's that? Samuel asked. The truth. You're free people now, under Pennsylvania law. You came here voluntarily. You've established residence, found work, integrated into the community. That makes you legally protected. Still tapped his pen on the desk. Now, if the senator tries to claim your fugitive slaves, he'll need to provide proof of ownership and go through the courts. That takes time, and time is on our side. What about the man watching our building? Catherine asked. He's probably just gathering information. Unless he has a federal warrant, he can't touch you. And getting a federal warrant for a white woman who left her husband voluntarily, that's tricky legal ground. Still smiled. I've been doing this a long time. We'll protect you. You have my word. They left the office feeling cautiously hopeful. Still had given them the names of 2 lawyers who would represent them if necessary. He had also sent word through the free black community to keep watch for the senator's agent and report his movements. The man disappeared from their street the next day, but Catherine knew it wasn't over. The senator would not give up this easily. She was right. In January, as Catherine's pregnancy entered its 7th month, a letter arrived at the boarding house. It was addressed to Catherine Whitmore, her old name, her married name. With shaking hands, she opened it. The letter was from Elijah. Catherine, I know where you are. I know what you've done. You have committed adultery, theft, and the corruption of my property. By all rights, I should have you arrested and that slave hanged. But I am a reasonable man. I am willing to offer you a way back. Return home. Leave the slave behind. Claim you were kidnapped, forced, coerced. I will publicly forgive you. The scandal can be managed. We can move past this. But the child you carry cannot be born. It is evidence of your crime, and evidence must be eliminated. A midwife will be arranged. The procedure is simple. Afterward, we can rebuild. This is my final offer. If you refuse, I will pursue you through every legal means available. I will destroy you and everything you've built here. I will see that slave burned alive, and I will watch you hang for your crimes. Choose wisely. E.W. Catherine read the letter twice, then handed it to Samuel without a word. She watched his face harden as he read. "He wants you to kill our baby," Samuel said flatly. "Yes, and come back to him." "Yes." "What are you going to do?" Catherine took the letter from his hands and walked to the small stove in the corner of their room. She opened the door and held the paper to the flames. They both watched it burn. "I'm going to have our baby," Catherine said, "and I'm going to raise that baby free. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure Elijah Whitmore never controls another human being ever again." Samuel pulled her close. "He'll fight. He'll make this as painful as possible. Let him. I'm not the woman he married anymore. I'm not afraid of him." And she wasn't. The fear that had controlled her entire life, the fear of scandal, of disapproval, of stepping outside her prescribed role, had burned away during their flight from Virginia. What remained was harder, clearer, stronger. She had crossed rivers in the dark. She had hidden from dogs and men with guns. She had ridden through mountains pregnant and terrified, and she had survived. Elijah Whitmore could threaten all he wanted. He had already lost. Their daughter was born in March, during a late-season snowstorm that blanketed Philadelphia in white. Mrs. Chen delivered her in their small room while Samuel held Catherine's hand and coached her through the contractions. The baby emerged, screaming and perfect, her skin a beautiful light brown, her eyes dark and alert. "She's healthy," Mrs. Chen announced, wrapping the baby in clean cloth. "Strong lungs, good weight. You did well, Sarah." Sarah. Her new name, her free name. Catherine, Sarah, held her daughter and wept with joy. Samuel sat beside them on the bed, staring at the tiny face with wonder. "She's ours," he whispered. "Really ours. No one can take her from us." "What should we name her?" Sarah asked. Samuel thought for a moment. "Hope. We name her Hope Freeman, because that's what she is. She's the hope we fought for." "Hope Freeman," Sarah repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that's perfect." They registered the birth the next week at City Hall. Hope Freeman, born March 15, 1843, to Thomas and Sarah Freeman, free residents of Philadelphia. No mention of plantations or senators or Virginia, just a free child, born to free parents in a free city. The legal battle with Elijah dragged on for 2 more years. He tried everything, claiming Catherine was mentally incompetent, that she had been kidnapped, that Samuel had used voodoo or drugs to control her. Each claim was more desperate than the last, and each one was struck down by the Pennsylvania courts. Finally, in 1845, the last lawsuit was dismissed. The judge ruled that Catherine had left voluntarily, that she was of sound mind, and that her marriage to Elijah had been effectively dissolved when she fled. Samuel was deemed a free man under Pennsylvania law, regardless of his status in Virginia. They were free. Legally, officially, finally free. The senator died 2 years later. Some said from a stroke, others from the humiliation of losing his wife to a slave. Sarah didn't attend the funeral. She didn't mourn. She simply turned the page and kept building her new life. By 1850, Thomas and Sarah Freeman owned a small house in Philadelphia. Thomas ran his own blacksmith shop, employing 3 other free black men. Sarah had become involved in the abolitionist movement, working with the Underground Railroad to help other escaped slaves find freedom. Hope was 7 years old, learning to read and write in a school for black children, growing up knowing nothing of chains or auctions or the brutal arithmetic of slavery. They had 2 more children, a son named Marcus, after the man who saved them, and another daughter named Ruth, after the woman who sheltered them. The Freeman family became a fixture in their community, respected and loved. Sometimes late at night, Sarah would stand at the window of their house and remember the woman she used to be. Catherine Whitmore, the senator's wife, living in a gilded cage on a Virginia plantation. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. She had burned that life down, and from the ashes had built something infinitely better. One evening in 1852, a young woman appeared at their door. She was black, perhaps 20 years old, with frightened eyes and torn clothes. She had escaped from Maryland and needed help reaching Canada. Sarah invited her in without hesitation. While Thomas gave her food and clean clothes, Sarah sat with her and told her the story of how she and Thomas had met, how they had run, how they had survived, how they had built a life together. "It won't be easy," Sarah said. "Freedom never is, but it's worth fighting for. It's worth everything." The young woman looked at her with something like awe. "You really did it. You really left everything behind." "Not everything," Sarah said, glancing at Thomas playing with their children in the next room. "I left behind the things that were killing me, and I kept the things that made me alive." That night, after the woman had been safely sent on to the next station of the Underground Railroad, Sarah sat on the porch with Thomas, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Everything we gave up?" Thomas took her hand. "I didn't give up anything. I gained everything. A name, a family, a future. You?" Sarah thought about the plantation, the society she had belonged to, the life of ease and privilege she could have continued living if she had just looked the other way. "No," she said, "no regrets, only gratitude." He kissed her hand. "Then we did all right, didn't we?" "Better than all right," Sarah said. "We did the impossible." And they had. Against every law and custom of their time, against hatred and violence and the full weight of an empire built on slavery, they had chosen love. They had chosen freedom. They had chosen each other. The Whitmore plantation continued operating for another 13 years, until the Civil War burned it to the ground. The family line died out completely. Elijah had no heirs, no legacy, nothing but a name on a gravestone. But the Freeman family grew. Thomas and Sarah's children had children of their own. Their descendants spread across the country, carrying forward the story of how their ancestors had defied an entire world to be together. Some called it betrayal. History called it scandal. But in the Freeman family they called it what it truly was: justice, love, freedom, and hope. Always hope.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to.
There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.